headlines before today. But in the last 24 hours, a doco about him has become an online phenomenon. Our website nearly crashed with the amount of people sending it in to us overnight, and while there are critics, let's take a look at Kony 2012.
So it is better when you kill us. And if possible, you can kill us, you kill us. For us, we don't want now to stay. Because
you don't want to stay on Earth.
We are only to no one taking care of us. If I saw my brother once again,
It's this young boy's cry that's broken millions of hearts around the world. Jacob crying for his brother, murdered by Ugandan rebels more than 10 years ago.
We are also going to do everything that we can to stop them. Do you hear my words? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This doco, created by charity group Invisible Children, has mobilised hundreds of thousands of people across the globe. And that promise to Jacob to stop the warlord Joseph Kony has become a global phenomenon. More than 16 million people have viewed this on YouTube alone in just 2 days. That grows by the minute. It's impossible to count hits through other media. Joseph Kony is #1 on the International Criminal Court's most wanted list. Indicted for war crimes, he heads the Lord's Resistance Army, a biblical name for pure evil.
But the crimes basically are these are crimes more than war crimes committed against the civilian population, including murder, sexual slavery, rapes, abductions.
The LRA steals African children, arms them, and forces them to commit the most atrocious violent crimes. It's systematic child abuse at its most obscene, and it's been happening unchecked for decades.
We are determined to cooperate with any friend of Uganda to ensure that this mindless killing and slaughter is ended.
But there is increasing criticism of the motivation of Kony 2012. Allegations of mismanaged charity money, accusations it's a complex issue, oversimplified for an online audience. But it's hard to deny it's captured the world's attention. It is a confronting issue, and one half a world away. A bizarre warlord stealing children, stealing childhood, terrorising whole communities. A wanted war criminal the world is seemingly powerless to stop. Perhaps until now.
And just checking now, over 23 million hits on YouTube alone, over I think 12 million on Vimeo as well. Aaron Lewis is a video journalist for Dateline on SBS, and he's actually spent time in Uganda tracking Joseph Kony. Aaron, this is almost unprecedented online phenomenon. You've been following Joseph Kony for years, but for most of us, we've only learned about him today. So how do you feel now that the world is finally taking notice?
It's pretty shocking, and I have to say that some congratulations are due to all the people behind the campaign. I mean, the film has had 13 to 15 million hits, an enormous amount, almost unprecedented in 48 hours, and it's a subject that people should be paying attention to.
Aaron, you personally spend time on the hunt for Joseph Kony. What can you tell us about the man?
Joseph Kony's fascinating, there's no question. I mean, he's one of the great villains of the 20th century. He's single-handedly destabilized most of Central Africa. He's reputed to be a magician. People who spent 20 years with him are afraid that he can hear them or track them or use his magical powers to hurt them from hundreds of miles away. You know, he's terrorized a huge amount of Africa for 25 years, and I think that the people behind this project are correct, that he needs to be stopped.
Mate, he's #1 on the International Criminal Court's most wanted list, and he's been at this for 25 years. How has he evaded capture for so long?
Well, Joseph Kony is probably the most brilliant jungle tactician of the 20th century. I mean, he knows that land better than anyone, outside of potentially some of the men who have been tracking him on foot for literally decades. I mean, I've met people who have been tracking Joseph Kony day in, day out, on foot for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. He knows the landscape, he knows the tactics, he knows the rocks to disappear under. He is a brilliant tactician in the jungle, and therefore very, very difficult to capture.
I understand he keeps moving and moving and moving, so he's never in one spot for very long. Do the children that he captures move with him?
They certainly do. They certainly do. And he forces them to a level of endurance that until I went on foot with the Ugandan army that I couldn't even understand. I have so much respect for the trackers in the Ugandan army who follow him 30, 50 kilometers a day, drinking almost no water on limited rations and limited resources. I mean, these men have nothing. They hit the ground with tents on their backs, everything they can carry, and just follow after Joseph Kony day in, day out. And Kony basically forces the children to go on the march.
Now, there's no doubt that Kony is a monster, that Kony should be stopped, but there are two sides to every story. There are critics of the Invisible Children's initiative saying that it oversimplifies the issue in Uganda. Do you agree with that?
I think what they're doing is really interesting, and I think for one thing you have to make it clear, they are not a journalistic organization, nor do they claim to be journalists. So they are angry, and they are trying to get some attention, and to that end I think they're doing a very good job. And I find a device in the film of introducing the topic to his son, quite a brilliant play in a sense of, it's almost this meta play where he's introducing the concept or the topic of Joseph Kony in the simplest possible way, even to his own, 4-year-old son. And I think they've done something very clever, because while it is an extremely complicated issue, there's no question it does come down to a very, very simple principle, which is the man needs to be caught.
Aaron, with all this worldwide media attention, all the millions raised from this media campaign, how will it actually bring Kony to justice?
Well, that is one of the most interesting questions, and I think one of the things that the film does underestimate is how brilliant Joseph Kony is in jungle combat. This assumption that just sending U.S. troops in is going to solve the problem, I don't think is correct. Joseph Kony has outplayed everyone who has ever come after him. I do think that dedicating resources to the problem is the thing that is most likely to bring him to justice. However, I think that the best people to track him are the ones on the ground. And interestingly, the Ugandan army's biggest successes came when they started employing ex-LRA soldiers in their own ranks, including people who are very, very familiar from personal experience with tracking Joseph Kony. Those were the people who got them closest. And I think that using local knowledge, really drawing heavily on the experience of the people who have spent so much time tracking him, is really the way to go from here.
Well, Aaron, 24 hours ago, we'd never heard of him. Tonight, that's all we can talk about. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us tonight.
I really appreciate your time, and I hope you will pay attention.
Last night, I checked my Twitter and there was a stack of messages about this. It was amazing. I've never seen anything like it.
Well, if you haven't had a chance to see the video tonight at 8 p.m, we will be airing the entire Kony 2012 documentary commercial-free. We'll also be chatting to Todd Sampson, as well as other experts, including a fierce critic of the doco, and also a former child soldier who's going to share his story with us as well. But for now, we've got to take a break. We'll be back in a minute.
Next on the project, American Pie's Jason Biggs and Sean William Scott back together.